Hey everybody, Jessica Morrison, Realtor here with Ferris Property Group based out of Indianapolis, Indiana, back for another top agent interview. Today we have with us Shawneequa Badger. Shawneequa, welcome to our show.
Hello there, everyone.
So girl, you are kicking butt over in California real estate. My audience has never met you before, so tell us a bit about who you are and just the nuts and bolts of your real estate in
Sure.
California.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, first and foremost. My name is Shawneequa Badger. I am the team lead of the Badger Real Estate Group. We are a full service real estate team out of the Bay Area, specifically the other city by the Bay, Oakland, California. We service all of the Bay Area, but home for us is Oakland, California. And I've been selling real estate. This is my 17th year. I've made it out with only 3 gray hairs that I've been able to catch.
I love that. So what propelled you to get into real estate? 17 years is nothing to look over for those watching. I feel like there's certain milestones that agents, if you're able to hit, you earn a lot more respect. So 17 years, congrats.
Oh, well, thank you.
What got you?
Well, I can say that I have a very unusual story. I got fired from my job, and I had some real estate books sitting in the corner of my home. I had a close friend that had come in and visited me to see um, my corporate job I was at the time, because I have worked in Silicon Valley. I worked in tech, and back then, going into like the break room and they have all the food and the soda and all the snacks was a big deal. And so I invited him over, and he said, "Hey, I work for this, I'm temping as an admin for this firm. Um, that does commercial real estate, and they're getting me to get my real estate license." He was like, "You should totally get your real estate license." I was like, "Well, I don't want to get my real estate license. My dad is getting his real estate license." So to me, it felt like it was like for older people. And mind you, I was 26, 24, 25 at the time. And no one looks young in real estate in those days. Everybody looked like that they were a little bit seasoned. I won't call them old, because they were probably like my age now. And I refuse to be called old. But fast forward, we had a shift in the economy, and I was let go of my job. So I was like, hey, I should probably dive into those real estate books over there and see what I can do. Now, I eventually got my real estate license, and the rest has become history, but that is how a life shift propelled me to get into real estate.
It's always amazing to me how sometimes the best things that come our way come from initially a challenge that we faced or a problem we had to solve. And we sometimes get pushed into opportunities that we never would have thought of on our own or ever even considered how had we not had that challenge. So while like being fired or being let go from your job was not ideal, I'm so excited for where it's allowed you to land because of that. Now, over the course of 17 years, did you come out swinging and have a kick that first year, or did it take time for you to build your brand and your business to get to the point of success where you are today?
Oh, it took time, because the environment then versus the environment now are two different teaching environments. They literally, I walked into the office after getting my real estate license. They were like, here's a real estate uh uh purchase agreement, go out and sell some shit. um that was really kind of how things were approached at that time. Like, just push the bird off the ledge and they will fly. There was no conversations about brands, and there was no conversations about building a business, taxes, all of those things that you hear now. That is a major, part of a conversation around building your business. And because the way that information was disseminated back in those days, And I say it like it's a very long time, but it feels like it's a very long time. Back in the olden days, and and also keep in mind that when we went to visit houses, we didn't have our cell phones. We had Thomas guides, and those Thomas guides were about this long, and you'd have to say, okay, it's okay, 1976 Simpson Way. You look at it in the back of the Thomas guide, then you refer to it in the maps, and you're like, okay, not that page. Okay, the next page over. Things were a lot more less simple. We didn't have these great pieces of technology that we have. So it took a while longer for me to start my real estate license. Also understand that there were people who absolutely owned markets because they dominated. Their signs were everywhere. People just went where the signs were. They didn't go based on referral. They didn't go based on a lot of things. Your signs was a big deal. So there was some people who had the markets were much more competitive to break into because people just went where they knew they saw the repetitive um, um, marketing pieces that were put up, either yard signs. I don't think that they did postcards back then. They might have. I don't know. I think it was more like people going and hanging stuff on your door
Mhm.
more than anything. So it took a while to break into a market. I think it took me like eight, maybe 8 months to a year to get my first deal done. But it took a while longer. I thought I was going to be able to, send out. Um, so I had bought one of these postage machines that you can do your own bulk postage. And I sent out all these beautiful, uh, hello, I'm in real estate letters to everybody I knew. And I thought that my phone would immediately start ringing and nothing happened.
Well, and I think that's also true that a lot of times we get into the business and we think, oh, it's going to be easy or a lot easier, I think, than what it actually is, and partially because of what you see on television, which wasn't the case when necessarily when you got your license, but I think that's many people's expectations today based on what they see on TV shows. But secondly, um, to have context more with where you were at, the attention was vastly different because we weren't heavily on the internet or using social media platforms today. You're absolutely right that the market acted differently with how they responded to different marketing strategies. So um, I'm so glad that things took off because, and that timeline is about right. It does take, on average, most people a year before they see any real traction. And for those watching, you are literally building a business from scratch, from the ground up when you get into real estate. Yeah, you have a brokerage that helps you, and every brokerage is different in how much they help you. But you are an independent contractor. There's no benefits. There's no paid maternity leave or anything like that. And that on some level has changed in the industry because now NAR has a healthcare program that's available for agents, but for a long time, you are an independent contractor. So bring us up to speed today. When did you start to see such like a huge shift maybe in your career? And where are you at in the Oakland area?
So there's two different times. Well, I guess like three different times when I saw shifts in my business. The first time was when I was relatively new in real estate. I realized because I had a background in website design. My background is marketing, so I realized that the interface for Craigslist was all HTML. So what I did was I built small web pages on Craigslist, and I worked with a really large broker. You're allowed to market all of your broker stuff. So I built small web pages all on Craigslist. There was no such thing as Zillow, Trulia, or none of that stuff. So I built these small web pages on Craigslist. People would look on Craigslist. That was the new newspaper. Um, People would be shocked if they realized that we used to run ads in the newspaper to advertise our open house. But But Craigslist was the new thing. It was the self-policing space. And then the San Francisco Bay Area was absolutely huge. So I would make these Craigslist ads and people would call. And I would just write the contracts. Those were my buyers. Those were my first buyers. And so to me, that was my first shift, right? Of learning the business, writing contracts, understanding how escrows work. That was my first shift. Then there was a second shift for me, which was 2008. I was pregnant, and I was 6.5, 7 months into my pregnancy, and I had a really difficult pregnancy. I almost died. My son died as a result of the high-risk pregnancy, the undiagnosed high-risk pregnancy. And I was literally out of the business for 2 years because 6 months after my son died, my daughter was conceived. And so I was in a high-risk pregnancy even with my daughter. They heavily monitored me because they did not want me to have any more children. And, when you're in a state of grief and you're not really thinking properly. So we were pregnant again. And so that was like 2 years, 2.5 years I was out of the business. And I had to find, I looked up and I had this newborn. And just like you said, we don't have paid family leave. So I had a newborn. I had to figure out how to provide for a newborn. And I got up and just hustled. My first conference after being away for a while, my daughter was 6 months old, and I put her on a plane, and we went to a real estate conference, and we networked, and about 2-3 months after that, I landed my first REO contract. So I was able to start selling foreclosed homes, and that helped sustain for myself and my daughter for quite some time. So that was shift number 2. Now we go fast forward to where we're at now, which is shift number 3, where the light turned on and I said, hey, I should have a logo. I should have a brand. And I should, all these things that I did for other people, I was like, oh, let me do it for myself now. So I built a brand and I started moving different on social media. And the next thing you know, people were like, hey, I want you to sell my house. The business exponentially took off. And then the team was created, and the speaking engagements started picking up. So and then we, like in a pandemic, they teach you how to be a recession-proof agent. I learned how to have a super germ-proof business that had a record-breaking year. So, it came in waves over a period of time. I think this wave will be more like a climb and not so much a wave anymore because of what I've learned in the past. But yeah, it definitely took some trial and error, some personal trial and error to kind of see things very different and kind of just operate different so that, those things don't replicate themselves in my business for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I've had myself on mute so that the audio comes clear. But first and foremost, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't imagine the grief, especially I think when you're high risk and you've got to be extra careful throughout pregnancy. But to go from grief to life with baby girl, I'm so glad that had a happy ending the second time around.
Yeah.
But I'm also glad that throughout that the REO process that was something you were able to specialize in, because as we all know, in 2008 that became even more a presence in the market. So was REO a significant market share for you following that first contract?
Yeah, so I actually was able to open the door for an REO contract that had been closed for 2 years. For 2 years, they had not accepted any more people. And it just happened that my pocket I was in San Jose, California at the time. My pocket of San Jose, California had no representation. So off top, I got 10 listings.
Wow.
And it was interesting. And so this is something I want to give to new agents that may be listening. You may feel like that you are in the new space for a very long time, like you'll never break into that top producer that's in your office. But when I got those REOs, let me tell you, all the top producers were calling me, asking me to have coffee with them because they did not have a business that transcended into a non-producing economy. And so all of a sudden they were like, can I have coffee? I want to know, how did you how did you get these REOs like out of nowhere, right? And these were the people that whose office doors I was knocking on, just wanting 5 minutes of their time. So understand that everything happens in shifts and waves. You just have to be ready for the opportunities when they present themselves.
Absolutely. So segueing a little bit into that, because being ready for opportunity in this business comes in all sorts of forms. And I realize that's kind of a vague statement, but first, how did you respond when you had people that were coming to you with questions that maybe had blown you off previously with questions? How did you choose to act when that happened? And then secondly, what opportunities do you see today in your local market that you feel you do a really good job with?
Well, when those people came to me, I have to say that I empathize with their position because now I was busy. And was too busy for coffee. Like I had a newborn baby that I was dealing with. I'm dealing with foreclosures, that I'm having to do site visits and deal with tenant occupancies and all this kind of stuff. So I was legitimately busy. So I could understand why they had that position at the time. So at that point, it was like, okay, I get it now. Now I'm on the other side of the glass and I understand. But in the same right, I still did not remove the empathy of people go through changes and sometimes they just need time. They need a break. They need a person to lean on. So what I would say is hey, I can't really do coffee, but I'm open to a conversation right now if you have time. So I wouldn't do the complete blow off because I did learn from that. The complete blow off just wasn't the vibe for me. But just giving them at least some time and some space to have a conversation. I gave them that much. I gave them that much grace. And so we have to learn in our business that grace will take you further than a lot of these other things that we see in the business. So I did give them grace.
And everybody said, boom. I feel like that's a good quote, like graceful, transcend everything else.
Absolutely. And that rings true. I tell my client, my team members that now, when they're in a hard space or they're dealing with something that's really combative in an escrow, give people grace because you never know where you're going to need that in the future. So lead with grace.
Absolutely. So for those who are watching this and are thinking of relocating to your area or are thinking of making a move, what would you advise them to consider or heavily look into that if they were not from your local area or maybe very well involved in your area? What should they be looking for in an agent and things within your community to pay attention to?
Well, we have a lot of micro communities, and I'm sure that that's the case. And culturally, they're different. Geographically, they're different. We have a lot of microclimates in the Bay Area. It can be 90 degrees inland and 60 degrees by the water. So you have to be very mindful of what your needs are in the marketplace. Whether it's schools, whether it's walkability, you have to have an understanding of that. And you don't have an understanding of it, you need to have an agent who is understanding of those areas so we can intentionally put you in those places. Because we don't have a city, specifically if you look at Oakland, that manages all of those areas, right? So we have to say, okay, this pocket has this pocket has that, and this pocket has this. Oakland is not really that big of a city. Most people don't realize that San Jose is the largest city in the entire Bay Area. So when I look at areas like San Francisco, I look at areas like Oakland, um, their micro communities are very much so micro. They're like this small compared to the areas in San Jose, which can be like this big in comparison. So the scale is much different. So you have to have a little bit more innate knowledge of those small areas and how they connect, how they don't connect, what works, what's not going to work. So you definitely need to have an agent that's knowledgeable, not only those communities, but also knowledgeable about how people are writing offers in those communities, because they're all vastly different. This community could have all your contingencies in it. This community could have no contingencies in it when you're writing an offer. And so when we sit down with buyers, we're up front before we even go out into the marketplace and start writing offers. We start having these conversations about what the expectations of the market are, so that you're not confused, dazed, or be overly anxious about the outcomes when we start writing offers. So the buyer consultation is really imperative for our buyers and sellers, so that we can get people on the same page, and then not deal with the extreme buyer fatigue that people would initially hit.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you had to rate maybe price wise for a family who could be really relocating to that area of town, what would be the most expensive and subsequent price point to least expensive out of the communities that you work in?
The most expensive?
Least to most, if you had to rate for
Oh.
just helping people from out of area have correct expectations about your local market.
So when we look at Oakland, you can buy a single family home for $500,000 easily. They're typically 2 bedroom, 1 bath, anywhere from 700 square feet to 900 square feet. And that's where the sticker shock happens, where most people, they go, what? Yeah, that's kind of the realities. And the other end of the pricing would be probably about 1.4 to 1.8. There's very few that are in the 2 million and above in the city of Oakland. But 1.4, 1.8 would be the other end of the pricing scale. About 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Most of those are on the hillside, so you don't have very much usable space in terms of outdoor space, but you do have very beautiful views of the bay. So that's kind of where the spectrum is in the city of Oakland, for sure.
So being a Hoosier or from Indiana, it's always fascinating to hear the pricing and the square footage that's correlated with that. And I think so much of that comes back to demand and then obviously population density. So that's very unique. I don't know if I should ask this from a demographic perspective, but are there certain types of people who tend to benefit more or are drawn to maybe more of the hillside style of living versus maybe those who are more in the inner city? Like what tends to propel those different decisions? I'm sorry if I'm not asking this question well.
No, but I understand it, right? I understand it. So I think most of it is just is lifestyle. If you want to be more walkable, then you're in the flatlands where you can easily get to things. If you're on the hillside, you're in canyons. You can't necessarily get to things easily. But people maybe like being in a highly an area that has a lot of vegetation around them. They may like the scenery. They may like the views. They may like just the serenity of the neighborhoods. It really does depend on, I think it's a lifestyle selection. And it's a lifestyle and a budget selection. If you can afford it, then you go there. But For the most part, I think people are there for the lifestyle. It's more suburban than it is in the flatlands for sure. Um, I think that is really the determining factors is the economics um, and the lifestyle for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. So, is there anything else that if someone was interviewing 3 different agents in your local area to be their dedicated listing agent, what would you tell them to look for? And what do you think sets you apart, maybe from those other agents?
Well, for us, service is not it is not, it's a value for us. Um, it's not a something that you get based on your pricing. We always try to make sure that the level of service that you get, whether or not you're buying a $500,000 home, is the same as if you're going to buy a $1.2 million home. And market knowledge is very important for us. So we're very active in the communities. So market knowledge is something that we hold true to, because we can feel when there's even a slight shift in the market. Why? Because we're in it. And we can usually tell that it's happening within a week or two, most of the time within a week's time, just based on our activity in the market. And lastly, we have a heart for the city. We are a team that really values people. So understanding that we create opportunities for people that most people don't have coming into a very high valued, high density type of environment. I always say that we will put you in places that most agents will not. Most agents will look at a pre-approval and say, we only think that you can be in this area. No, we're going to fight for you to be in whatever you can afford. So many times that means that we're working harder, but that's okay, because it's for the benefit of our agents. It's the benefit of our clients, and that's why they hire us.
So when you're talking about agents who tend to profile clients based on a pre-approval letter, would you go so far as to say that they're redlining or restricting areas that they will only show clients to based on that pre-approval letter?
Oh,
Or
absolutely.
wow.
It's definitely a steering tactic. It can be perceived as a redlining tactic. Um, it absolutely is based on maybe their biases and then also what they're comfortable with, right? I don't want to have to fight. If you're in that $500,000 range, I don't want to have to fight for you where it's most competitive, but I will put you where you can absolutely blow out a budget in a less in a lower property value. So yeah, there's a lot of things that go along with that. It's unfortunate, but it's what we see in our markets these days.
Now, for those who might be watching this, because I know a bit more about your background than those who are not familiar meeting you for the first time in this interview, um, what would you say to agents who might be guilty of steering or are trying to break that habit? How would you encourage them to either educate themselves or maybe reevaluate their process to be better um, in providing the best service available to their clients?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but if you're not going to be of service to clients um, where there's equality and fairness, then my recommendation is for you to probably refer that client to somebody who will.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is, now I understand that I'm telling you to give away the majority of your commission, but in actuality, I'm telling you to do the right thing when it comes to servicing a client, servicing a family. This is not just somebody that you're getting a commission check from. This is somebody whose generational wealth depends on the decision that you make as a practitioner in today's society. So imagine if put yourself in the position of that person. If you were in their shoes, you'd want, again, the same grace to be given to you as a first-time home buyer or somebody that was selling their home, that was a family home. You want to make sure that same grace was extended to you and not undermining your family's ability to build generational wealth.
And I think also what you're saying, but not saying, if I might add to that, is I think a lot of times too, when agents work with clients, the clients will dictate what areas, meaning if I say, oh, what areas are you thinking of? They might list off certain school districts or certain suburbs, and the agent will go from there. But I think part of our job as agents is to also help, no matter what that client looks like, help that client understand what options are available to them, because they might dismiss areas of town because they don't think either that they can afford it or whatever their bias or stereotypes coming into that, both positive or negative. They could be self-limiting. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just as many times if I've had people say, um, I've had other agents tell me, like, how did you get that kind of a client? uh, Referral, where they see that I've done good work online. I mean, I didn't know that there was a certain um, uh, a standard in which I had to fulfill to work with that kind of a client. But that also happens on the client side too. The limiting beliefs absolutely will dictate where you feel like you belong in a city, or how much you should be spending, or the opportunity you should afford yourself. So it's interesting when we push clients to do what they need to do. They absolutely see the benefits from that. A lot of my clients are now seeing the six-figure returns as a result of me pushing them into saying, hey, maybe you should look at this area. What do you think? You can afford to live over here. Here's the options, here's the opportunities. And now they are going, Shawneequa, you are absolutely right. But that comes with not only understanding what their outcomes are from the buyer's consultation, but that also comes with understanding the market and the direction of the market as well.
And again, I think that not only comes from serving their needs on a practical level, like favorite grocery stores, parks, accessibility to certain amenities, but also thinking big picture, because we are stewards or liaisons in this industry where, like you said earlier, it's a fiduciary responsibility that enables people to build wealth. So I think a lot of times people may not be educated in real estate or find it overwhelming and don't see the big picture. So I love that you're so passionate about education on that front, because our careers in general help shape family trees, but I love that you are so intentional about that. Is there anything else on that subject that you'd like to add or advocate for?
Well, I just want to make sure that we all understand that I love the way you position that and saying that we are all stewards. We are. We are absolutely stewards of our industry or stewards of our communities, and we should lead with that. I think people need to understand that we all have a responsibility to make the areas that we service better, the people that we service better. My mantra is always, you're going to leave me better than once you came. And so I pray that every time I touch somebody, that may be the case, whether I work with them or not. So with that being said, this is how we've been able to organically grow our business based on humanizing the real estate business.
That's beautiful. I love this interview, Shawneequa. It's just so good. So for those who would like to connect with you offline, maybe they have more questions about your area, and just for sanity purposes, I know you're in Oakland, but what are the other areas that you service?
We actually service a pretty big footprint. We do all the way from the southern tip of the South Bay area, which is what I still call the heart of the Silicon Valley, that's San Jose. And I do that because I'm very biased. I'm a San Jose native. All the way up into Central Valley, because we're managing people who are moving into the Central Valley because it's more affordable. So we have a very big footprint. Online, I'm pretty easy to find on all social media sites, except for TikTok. I have not journeyed there yet. My assistant is going to roll me into the TikTok fire tomorrow, I think. But I'm easily defined on all social media, and either under my first and last name, Shawneequa Badger, or under our team name, which is the Badger Real Estate Group.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Shawneequa, for your time today. And for those watching, her information will be provided either in the description or comment section of this video. As always, feel free to connect with me if you have any real estate needs in the Indianapolis area. But Shawneequa, girl, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.